20 years ago, many products and services that form an inherent part of our retail financial landscape today simply didn't exist. Since then, FinMark Trust took the dream of making financial markets work for the poor and turned it into a practical reality. We do this through the development and implementation of regional and national financial inclusion strategies. We work with stakeholders to effectively track progress.
I was approached back in 2002 to consider becoming the founding CEO of this new entity called FinMark. Hugh was the person who first introduced me to the notion of market systems thinking, making markets work for the poor. Then a relatively early stage concept which was being incubated within different parts of DFID. Under the market systems approach, the first initiative became FinScope, which was launched in late 2003. FinMark Trust launched at a really interesting juncture in South Africa's history. By 2002, a lot of the early enthusiasm around new institutions to address historic apartheid-era inequalities had worn off somewhat, and there was a bit of a lull which started to result in new action being galvanized within the financial sector under some pressure of directed lending targets from the government. The momentum towards the financial sector charter created a really interesting precedent, which has been remarked on around the world in a number of years after it was signed, which was 2004.
I was quite clear as a representative of the banks in this country that it's not that making financial markets work for the poor is a nice thing to do, or the politically correct thing to do, or the morally correct thing to do. The way I got it through the board of the Banking Council at that time eventually was to say that this is an investment in the creation of a far broader and deeper market for the banking sector. And this isn't a cost, this is an investment. And that's how we saw it.
So I think one of the really exciting things about FinMark was its sort of ability to punch above its weight, really. Little FinMark, based in South Africa, with really strong intellectual capital that had been developed by this extraordinary team of people that I was extremely fortunate to inherit. And were able to have real influence, was able to have real influence with, these global organizations like the World Bank and the IMF and with treasuries and regulatory agencies all over Africa.
I joined FinMark Trust in 2010 to establish a financial integration unit in the SADC region. At the time, FinMark's focus was on financial inclusion at country level in South Africa and in other countries in the SACO region. That was the first time that FinMark embarked on the journey to complement the financial inclusion work with the regional financial integration work. And essentially, that was about looking at how you can integrate different financial systems in the SADC region. And hence the focus at the time on integrated payment systems in the SADC region, in particular, the cross-border remittance agenda.
Over the past 2 decades, we have witnessed many financial market changes across Southern Africa. FinMark has worked with its partners in the region to achieve the following impact. 48 million adults were newly included in the formal financial system in the last decade, 22 million being women. 4.4 million people benefit from lower cross-border remittance prices, 60% of them being women. Formal cross-border remittance transaction volumes have also risen by 69%. In the case of Lesotho, the price of sending remittances from South Africa has dropped over 70% in the past 5 years alone. New products introduced in this corridor now remits 1 billion rand a year. In the first 18 months of the adoption of the SADC regional mobile money guidelines, Malawi's 2.8 million mobile money wallet users received $1.6 million in interest payments, with the first being launched 5 years ago. As a result of these guidelines, the use of mobile money in the region is increasing, with people earning interest on their savings. We have supported people in the region who were affected by the COVID fallout by creating a migrant relief fund. With the direct support of the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office (FCDO), the fund reached 12,500 families across 5 countries.
Access to the financial markets and access to finance was a critical part, and FinMark Trust has done exceptionally well in broadening access, in deepening access, in enabling financial institutions to, on the back of the work that FinMark Trust has done to develop appropriate products for different sectors of the market, in enabling a more appropriate policy environment through National Treasury and SAB also becoming more not aware but taking more seriously financial instruments to enable interaction in trade and other issues in remittances and so on for poor people, and to make that easier and cheaper. All of that, I think FinMark Trust has been very successful at doing.
From my view, FinMark Trust performs a critical advocacy role, and this role is based on research and evidence. And I find that it comes with proposed interventions, or maybe at the outset is putting the information out there so that blind spots can be recognized and probably internalization of possible actions may emerge. But in some respect, it goes further to propose areas where interventions could be called for and where we could all hold hands to ensure that we make the system better and we make the system serve the communities that needs to be served.
Migrants are part of the makeup of the SADC region. In particular, South Africa is a destination for economic migrants. And often when they come here to work, it's to send money home to support their families or their friends, or at times their businesses. As one of the largest net senders on the continent of remittances, there is a lot of focus on South Africa. FinMark Trust has been working on the agenda of remittances for over 10 years. And in the process, we've tried to understand the size and values of corridors. We've tried to understand informality in corridors, which is quite difficult, but we've developed a methodology to do that. And we've tried to understand the pricing and what is happening in those corridors. We've done this through data, mainly, that we receive from the Reserve Bank, as well, of course, speaking to people that use remittances, going and understanding the technology. And through those reviews, we've been able to assess what the blockages are and what regulatory constraints are causing the high prices or high informality. Over this 10-year period, the price of cross-border remittances, the average price in the region has dropped from 25% to 10%. Through all of the work that we've done on the regulatory policy, and informality has reduced from 70% to less than 50%. This base and all of that work that we've done has actually given us a springboard to do a whole lot of other work. And the sort of work that we're doing is looking at regional KYC, so frictionless KYC for everybody to have access to formal financial services. It is more difficult for someone who is vulnerable or at the bottom end of the pyramid to access financial services than for those that aren't. It's given us a springboard into understanding impacts of national disasters or disasters like COVID, and how can we support migrants with grants. And the third big one, which is really the next frontier, is it's given us a methodology as well as technical financial service rails to see if informal cross-border traders can be supported and can be as formalized as cross-border remittances were through the same methodology.
FinMark Trust's impact has grown and evolved over the past 20 years.
To me, one of the critical moments was when we started getting queries from not just the continent, but from other parts of the world on Frisco. 20 years ago, we were the only show in town in this area. The fact that there are other organizations that have come in that are looking at not duplicating what we're doing, but some of the areas of the market and so on, is a sign of our success.
In many ways, FinMark was a forerunner of an approach that recognized the need for independent, equipped, professional change agents in the financial sector. I think the hallmarks of FinMark's influence you can see down the years in the fine work which has been done in many ways since then in a number of different sectors. Its reach has extended, and it has become known for a quality of research and for a voice of engagement that is constructive, hopeful, factual, evidence-based, and yet always committed to this vision of wanting to see holistic financial inclusion promoted.
There will be many challenges in the next 10 years. We will need to face them together to make a difference in the lives of the poor.
The challenges relating to financial inclusion are still key and quite pronounced. So we cannot relax. We have to do everything to ensure that we nail that. Collaboration amongst regulators is key, and the fact that the regulators can leverage the private sector and other organizations like yourself would actually make us gain traction. And in this regard, one could put at the core to say public-private partnerships should be central to the success of this work.
In my view, FSDs are still very relevant. And I think the main reason for that is that they are able to offer sustained support to partners in countries. That idea of having, a sustained, supportive resource at the center of the market, causing markets to change and nudging those change processes, I think is really, really important.
When we talk about inclusion, we should be talking not just about financial inclusion, but in inclusion related to the positive effects of having included poor people in the financial sector. So by that I mean, and I referred to this earlier, that we should be concentrating quite a bit on how we now ensure. So for instance, an obvious point that comes up is the African Free Trade Agreement is going to start happening, we hope, to a certain extent. I think that FinMark Trust needs to ask, how are poor people, how are people who now have access to the financial system in some way or other, how are they going to capitalize off intra-African trade as and when it happens? How are small and medium businesses going to do that? So look at inclusion more broadly. How do we include those that would be under normal circumstances excluded because they don't have the wherewithal, they don't have the tools that bigger organizations and businesses might have to actually participate, for instance, more effectively in intra-African trade. And I think FinMark has the history, has the experience of looking at bringing excluded people in, concentrated on the financial sector.
Trust has adopted a framework where we integrate gender with a focus on women into all of our programs. The output or the impact that we want to make is to improve the livelihoods of women. I think that in terms of disaggregation of data and understanding the difference, for example, in access that women have to men, we are quite good. But I think the one thing that we've not done is really tried to understand the real challenges and actually getting to the nub of what the actual challenges are that women have in improving their livelihoods through having more than just disaggregated data. So we understand that often and in many countries, women may be as financially included as men. But when we really start to understand the attributes of financial inclusivity, which as financial inclusion practitioners we want to do, we realize that actually having, access to a bank account is most probably often not going to improve a woman's livelihood. Most probably some of the routes to improved livelihoods that men have is very different to women due to factors such as agency, just due to factors such as social norms. So it's quite a complex environment, but we are committed to ensuring that every single program and all impacts that we are looking at, we are constantly trying to understand the improving women's livelihoods, to creating economic inclusivity for women, and to ensuring that they are equally part of the structure and of the fabric of what we are trying to do in the region.
Our journey with financial inclusion has been a long one. Over the last 20 years, the world has seen many variations or developments around financial inclusion. The shift that we are now making is as a result of us learning that giving somebody a bank account is not enough. It's not going to result in people improving their livelihoods. It's not going to get them a job. As we celebrate our 20th anniversary as an organization in the financial inclusion world, we obviously have to reflect on what's next. What does the next 10 years hold for us? We will continue to be a partner to the donor world, for those donors who are interested in the same objectives as ours, and they have played an immense role in the last 20 years for FinMark Trust. And ultimately, we want to contribute to an inclusive economy and an inclusive financial sector that is able to support and build the real sector in our region. That is what we will set out to do. We're on that journey already, and we will continue to learn and to innovate with our partners and to find new solutions. Our approach is to be evidence-based, and we believe that's the best way to make policy, and that's the best way to allocate resources.
FinMark Trust, making financial markets work for the poor. To us, 20 years on, this is as relevant as ever.